Welcome to Innovating Leadership, Co-Creating Our Future. I'm your host, Maureen Metcalf, founder and CEO of the Innovative Leadership Institute. I'm delighted to be joined today by Mike McLellan. He's a vice president of operations for DHL Supply Chain. And we're going to be talking today about how supply chains leverage innovation, sustainability, and other governance programs to help enhance and create value. Mike, I'm delighted that you have joined us today.
Thank you, Maureen. I am delighted to be here as well.
Let's jump in. How has supply chain evolved and recovered post-pandemic? Because we all know that we were actively watching ships off the coast of Long Beach and every place else full of containers.
Looking at it from the inside, I think what a lot of people don't realize is that COVID didn't necessarily create supply chain issues, but they rather highlighted already existing challenges that were already out there. One thing that's happened over the course of a few years, supply chain is a cost, and there's always a driver to lessen cost in supply chains. Manufacturing costs have driven people to go offshore or into Mexico for the cheapest labor possible. Cheapest transportation means that you're generally shipping things over in containers from offshore manufacturing locations. What COVID did is it highlighted that there were problems within these supply chains. So a single source of manufacturing in China became a problem when China shut down during COVID. Having transportation tied up in shipping when most of the ports, like you mentioned in Long Beach, most of what came from Asia ported into Long Beach. When there became a wall of COVID in Long Beach, I think at one time I heard something like 700 plus ships waiting to get into the port. That transportation cost, then, even though it was the cheapest alternative, it really created bottlenecks. I heard of people that were trying to bypass the COVID wall in the ports by transporting things by air, which, again, created additional costs, but, we actually had to do whatever we could to get freight into the United States. Demand changed. People were locked down and they started purchasing more things for their homes, or they started going to online. A lot of people were not prepared for that. There were certain things, like I had a son at the Naval Academy at the time, and they locked down the Naval Academy. They shut it down for a few months. And they did not have a way to do online schooling at the time. So they had to develop that throughout COVID. There were a lot of things that happened during COVID that really we were not prepared for. So that happened, I guess it's been going on 3 years ago now. And, it lasted a good 2 years and really started to clear up last year. But what we found was that, now people are taking a look at what their supply chains, what it caused in the supply chain, and trying to mitigate future issues with that. So as people look to fix their supply chain, they're having to look at different ways of doing business. That's what we've seen a move towards in the last year or two. People that did not have ways to distribute e-commerce, they now have that or are moving towards that. People are now having to create more capacities to make sure that they're closer, they have enough capacity or enough product to supply to their customers. Customer demands haven't changed at all. Just the ability to get the supply chain closer has changed.
How do you see it evolving as organizations are having a clearer understanding of what's shifting, and yet what's shifting now is going to shift again, it seems like in 5 minutes, depending on whatever the next thing is?
Yeah, I think the focus now is resilience, really taking a look at where you're at and having to bounce back from the next disruption and get to what is considered normal supply chain operations. I don't think that supply chain operations will ever be strictly normal, but all that comes with a cost. So as I mentioned, multi-source origins, whereas we used to take a look at sourcing in one country, especially if you look at a China or a Taiwan and the potential for disruptions in those areas, having to single source into those areas is no longer an option. Capacity is another issue where we're seeing a lot of people taking a look at what their capacities are. We have some people who or some companies that actually single source in one building or in one location. Whereas now they're taking a look at bi-coastal operations or moving to a redundant operation where they can have multi-sources out there, redundant manufacturing or distribution. Staffing and headcount is another big thing right now. As I failed to mention earlier, one thing that we faced during COVID was headcount issues, staffing issues. A lot of people exited the workforce. Before COVID hit, there was a report that I used to quote quite often. I can't remember how old it is. It's probably at least 5 or 6 years old, that stated that supply chain leaders will be in short supply by 300,000 people right around this time. And I can tell you that that number is escalating as we speak. There is a greater need for supply chain workers and leaders. Supply chains are becoming more critical to manufacturing and operations overall, retail, and making sure that we have the right staffing and headcount is more and more critical all the time. But, we're doing that against an exiting workforce or a workforce that never really came back. We saw expenses increase by about 50%. They're distributing through distribution centers versus retail stores. And what used to be a job that was in the low teens as a starting pay started escalating up to the high teens, low 20s at start. And that hasn't changed. We did not pull back off of that after COVID. And so a lot of people are able, whereas maybe they had a lower paying job where they had that job plus a half job or 2 jobs, because of the increase in pay, they were able to eliminate some of those positions. Or maybe they had a family member that was also working, that they were allowed to stay home now and build their family instead. So we started to see a lot of shifts in those ways. And, we're starting to come back, but there are still lots of challenges. And again, it's only as good as the next disruption. That could be local, it could be regional, weather issues come into play. You've seen things happen in California in the last few weeks, last couple months that have not happened in a long time. I believe I heard about a tornado in Los Angeles last week. It's something that, and I think that followed a blizzard or a snowstorm, maybe just a few weeks before that. There are things that are happening with the environment that are also causing disruptions, and that's just in the United States alone. So if you look at more globally, there could be interruptions anywhere. Ukraine has caused interruptions in gas and energy supplies that have repercussions around the world, and cost increases that happen all over the place. And so being prepared to react to those disruptions is what's critical to supply chain.
As you talk about finding alternate sourcing options, Columbus is the site of a new Intel plant, and so reshoring some of this manufacturing. And yet this is a years-long process, multi-year process, just to build one fab. They're building 2 initially, I believe, but it's a multi-billion-dollar investment on the part of Intel. So I assume similar for other manufacturing and other inputs. So this idea of we just find a second source isn't as simple as I just pick up and go on Amazon and look for 2 manufacturers. Depending on the complexity of my products, it could be multi-year to address the production side, and that doesn't address the labor side, which, to your point, seems like it's structural. Some of our older workforce just doesn't want to come back and do this anymore. And as you've said, the increased income allows people more flexibility. So many of the jobs we see, especially hard to staff, will likely be hard to staff long term.
That's correct. And you mentioned the multi-year complexity of building out some redundancy or some onshoring. We saw that issue during COVID. A lot of people were looking for real estate, and either the real estate wasn't there, it was snatched up. We saw Amazon take almost every available building in the US that they could. The complexities of having staffing to build real estate, we would do site searches for potential new opportunities, and literally we could go into an area and there might be 3 or 4 buildings available, and that was in the whole market. And if you didn't jump on those buildings within a week, it would change. You would see that those buildings have been snatched up. They had someone put their name on it. There was definitely a shortage of opportunities for people to, I would say, change their supply chain real time or jump into something that would help. I think people added capacities ad hoc very quickly. And now they're looking at that increased cost and kind of taking a step back, with the possibility of a recession looming or just increased costs overall. A lot of companies are feeling the brunt of that. You're seeing that in corporate earnings right now. There has been some challenges. There's challenges with excess stock. What happened is we had seasonal stock that was caught in a port, and the next season we brought it in around the port, or it was prioritized. All of a sudden now you've got a season's worth of stock that you've got to sell through. And how do you do that? You do it by discounting, or you hold that inventory and pay the cost of that. So a lot of companies are challenged with the cost increase they've had in those ways. They're taking a step back and saying, well, do we really have a capacity problem? It seems like capacities are loosened up. Maybe we don't have a problem. But what they're really not looking at is the reality that the next disruption could put them right back where they were before. So I think that there's a lot of challenges in folks looking at where they're at and trying to decide what's my next move. And everyone, in all of my conversations I've had with existing companies, potential customers, it's really about how do I plan for the next disruption, but how do I manage my costs as well? So, that's always going to be a complexity with supply chain. Unfortunately, what I do, we don't make any money. We only cost money. And so making sure that we lessen our costs in supply chain is important to the customer. I should say important to our collaborators. The end customer, they don't really care. They still want the end demand, good execution. They want their product. There's a lot more visibility into the supply chain, the last mile supply chain. Customers still want better information. They want better delivery. We've been spoiled by the click the button and get it. I'm guilty of this myself. Get it same day if you can get it, or at the worst next day or 2 days. Customers still want that. They're ambivalent to the increased costs unless we pass that on to the customers. So yeah, lots of complexities that are still driving either change or the need for change, or the view that there should be change in the future.
It's interesting. During the pandemic, I was buying some things on an online auction site, not DHL. I'll say that right up front. But I would order.
We don't do auctions yet, but
Well, it was an online auction site that would then ship whatever I purchased to me. So they were unique items, and periodically they'd just get lost. And it was from like 100 miles away. It wasn't coming from Europe or the Middle East or something. It was Cincinnati coming to Columbus. But from the auction, so I bought a couple earrings. Little tiny box, didn't make it from the auction site to the shipper, or somebody lost it. It fell off a thing because it was small. Who knows? There were probably a bunch of earrings sitting behind some shelf someone will find with my name on it someday. But just that it's even things that for us as customers look pretty simple, the off-size boxes, and I assume Amazon moving pallets of stuff, they probably don't get lost so often. But those little bits and pieces of things are complicated to ship.
Yeah, and we could quote that delivery is 99.98% on time in the industry, or whatever the number may be. And frankly, you don't care. What you care about is your one little box that didn't deliver. That's the reality of the customer these days. And that's what my partner companies or folks that are in this industry, that's what we have to remember and be cognizant of, is that customer demand and the expectation for better communication, better information is not going to go away. It's only going to enhance. We talk about customer delight. I worked for Amazon.com very early in their existence. And, one thing that we used to hear from Jeff Bezos, money on this, does the customer care? Does it enhance their ability to be delighted? Are there things that we're doing to enhance their experience with us? I used to spend my Christmas days, my first 2 or 3 years with Amazon, opening presents with my children. And there were a handful of us that would head to the distribution center with the thought that a potential customer is going to get their first computer into this newfangled online ordering thing, and they're going to order something from Amazon.com. And when they ordered, our goal, it was maybe a handful of shipments or 20 or 30 or whatever the number may be. Our goal was to get that product to a shipped status within hours, because that customer would be so delighted that they would share that with all of their friends and relatives. I ordered something from Amazon.com on Christmas Day and it shipped that day. That's the type of thing that we're facing now in the industry, is that customers want to be delighted. They're expecting being delighted now. The communication of what happens with your shipment. I just ordered a custom pair of Nikes that were DHL colors. It's actually very cool and has DHL Supply Chain on the back of the shoe. But the ordering process and the communication process was phenomenal. They let me know when they got my order. They let me know when it entered manufacturing. When it was done being manufactured, I got an email. When it was shipped from China, I got an email. When it was entered into the United States, I got an email. When it hit the delivery truck, I got an email. It was almost too much communication, but there was never any question as to where my product was. When it delivered to my doorstep, I got a picture of it. I was away from home at the time, and I was able to call my wife and say, hey, I just got a delivery of my brand new cool DHL Nike shoes. Can you go take them off the porch so that nobody will steal them? And, that's the type of customer service that we are looking at now these days.
Well, and so from company perspective, DHL as a company or other companies that are engaging in supply chain, that means a significant investment in technology.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, looking at digitalization and innovation, they're the new realities. I am privileged to be involved in a number of innovation type experiences. Locust bots, I think for anyone that's in the industry and in supply chain overall, warehousing, distribution, Locust bots is a picking bot. We're at the forefront of using Locust bots. I think DHL just recently eclipsed 100 million picks worldwide with these Locust bots. Traditionally a picker used to have to move from aisle to retrieve goods. They could walk, we'll say 8 miles in the course of their day, moving a heavy cart with heavy boxes on it. Now the robots actually do all the traveling, and the associate can be contained to a much smaller location where they see a bot dwell and they walk up and pick, and the bot is carrying the heavy box. There's no longer these large carts where associates might run into each other, or they might strain themselves by maneuvering these carts through a wide picking area. They could traverse 100,000 square feet, time after time after time in the course of the day. Now it might be 300 or 400-foot aisles that they just have to watch to make sure that a bot that's dwelling gets a pick. We have things like exoskeletons that people can wear that actually strengthens your movements, and it tells you how you're lifting, gives you feedback on whether you have the right support in your body and whether your lifting activities are the right ones. It reduces your physical exertion. We have floor scrubbing bots that work autonomously. You create a path where they need to clean the floors, and you set the robots loose and they go and scrub the floor for you. We're currently piloting an autonomous unloader through Boston Dynamics called Stretch. I think it's a pretty industry-wide, well-known pilot where, we don't have to have associates that are unloading in hot trucks in the middle of summer, or in very cold trucks in the middle of winter, or lifting boxes that weigh 30, 40 pounds from over their head, or picking it up from the floor. We have bots that are doing this now. There's just a number of other things that innovation is helping out. What we call big data. There's so many data points now, and things like predictive analytics that will help us to get the right product in the right quantity, the right place, to the right people at the right time. Recently was working with a customer on a collaborative project together, where the first thing we do is we ask for data from them. And back in the day, I don't think that we could have gotten the type of data that we can get now. I literally got like 30 or 40 million lines of delivery and activity data that we can then analyze and help them come up with the right approach for their operations. So, if you look at digitalization, if you look at big data, innovation opportunities, there's a lot that will help us in supply chain to help improve not just the customer experience, but the associate experience as well. One thing we have to remember about these innovation and technology pursuits is that we're really at the infancy stage in these things. There's a lot of things. 20 years ago, we didn't have these opportunities. We were just talking 20, 25 years ago about e-commerce being the next big thing. 25 years ago, Amazon.com only sold books. And now they've evolved into what can't you find on Amazon? But now we're actually talking about so many other things. In our operation, I'll bet you we have at least 60 or 70 different types of innovative things that we work on with at DHL. We're great partners. We are, I think, leaders in taking look at these initiatives, these technology initiatives. We partner with a lot of companies to help drive these initiatives and to make them worthwhile, to make them useful in supply chain.
So talking about technologies that are useful in supply chain and that you're partnering with other companies, it seems like that is going to help you, the end customers, and your clients build their resilience even when labor forces are shifting, that you will have the capacity to navigate more of the disruptions than you did in the past.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And on top of that, where we think that innovation, there's always a thought that robotics or innovation is going to eliminate jobs. I have a use case in one of my operations where these locust bots actually, I would not say eliminated or what we would say is replace jobs, but what happened was we were able to repurpose those jobs. So instead of actually removing people from the operation, we were able to move them to other parts of the operation to increase capacity. We're starting to see more of that. So there's a study that I recently read that said automation will eliminate 85 million jobs by 2025. But the reality is it creates another 97 million new jobs. So we're not really eliminating jobs. We're just moving them around into whether it's other industries or other areas of a building or supply chain. We're starting to see that innovation enhances our work lives, but doesn't necessarily replace the need for staffing. What it does is I think it helps to just create different types of jobs with new skills and new training needed. The feedback on locust bots in our building that, in my experience, we have one of the largest implementations of locust bots in one building. There's an excitement level that comes with dealing with robots. Instead of moving a box all day long or just filling an order, I get to interact with this really cool bot. I get to go home and tell my family that, hey, I'm working in robotics. I'm working on technologies that are really at the forefront. And this is really cool and interesting. I think I love to see that excitement level. And really we're able to train people in a different way and get them involved in different things that help drive them. It really helps make us a better place to work and a more interesting place to work.
I can say that I had a lot of fun the day that you demoed one of your robots for me, that I hadn't seen that before. And I don't know if I expected it to look like something out of Avatar or what, but it was cool to see the bot come by, pick, move things around, and imagine a warehouse with a few thousand of them and how efficient they must be, and like they don't crash into each other like humans do when they're on their cell phones or something, that they are sensing, they're spatially aware, they're able to pick without dropping things, and they don't get tired.
Yeah, exactly. And they generally are, they come to work on time. They don't call out very often. But, there are challenges. Again, we are at the forefront. There's a lot of testing and implementation and pilots, a lot of things that goes into making sure that these technologies work. One thing that right now, as we get further and further down the technology road, I believe that we will come down in cost. We'll increase in efficiency, we'll increase in productivity, but there's a long way to go. Like I said, I believe technologies like this are in their infancy, especially in the supply chain space, in warehousing and distribution. I think manufacturing is a lot further down the road. You can go I toured a BMW plant a few years ago, and it was just awe-inspiring to see the type of technologies, the type of robotics that were in there building cars. We're not quite there yet in warehousing, but, I believe that we will have a lot of improvements over the next few years. And, in collaborations with our technology companies, I think it's a great partnership that we'll see a lot of improvements in.
It is interesting as you mention this because it raises some societal questions, not removing jobs, but shifting jobs. I've been playing around with Chat GPT and it's now become my coworker, that there are things I can do much more efficiently that I just wouldn't have done before. I would have just said that that's going to take too long. I'll say no to that opportunity. So I actually get to say yes to opportunities. And I assume similarly in the warehousing space, if you can't find employees, there are times you must say no, especially when adding shifts and working on weekends and those kinds of things, that you can deploy bots for longer hours. They don't need breaks. I know they need programmed maintenance, so it's not like they're perfect, but it does take out some of the roles that humans often don't want to do or are less healthy for people to be working night shifts and things like that.
But what it also does, and I think I mentioned this earlier, is it gives humans jobs that they might want to do more. We're in a different world now. You just mentioned Chat GPT. I have not touched Chat GPT yet. I mean, I just learned how to text effectively. So, I'm not quite there yet, but, it was a different world in our age coming up. 30 years ago when we were coming out of school or just getting into the work world, they didn't have these opportunities. Now it's an expected. The world's a much smaller place. There's an expectation that we will do technologically advanced things. Being able to present that to a workforce that's just coming out of school or that's developing and evolving, that's getting into their own careers, it's very important. Folks are looking for these types of opportunities. And if they don't get them, they're going to go find them where they are. So it's important for us to have opportunities for people to work with these types of technologies. This really is the future. Whereas again, we're in our infancy, we're going to see the people that are coming up and getting into the workforce now, they're going to grow up with these things. Whereas we kind of read stories 25, 30 years from now where they'll say, hey, I remember back then when these robotics were primitive, look at what's happening now. There's talks about dark facilities where you're basically, you won't need to turn the lights on. It doesn't take any kind of customer service out of the equation. More people will be able to serve the customers or program these bots or to analyze data that helps them make better business decisions overall. So I think the horizon's very bright in that way.
So as you talk about bots evolving, you've talked about predictive analytics. Where is artificial intelligence or machine learning coming in on that path?
Yeah, again, I think it goes along with all of those things. I think that the horizon on machine learning is just as bright. Artificial intelligence, I think if, AI is a hot topic right now. A lot of people coming out of schools engineers are geared towards developing AI and machine learning. We talk about the fourth industrial revolution being on the cusp of that right now. The rapid changes in technologies and industries, the interconnectivity, smart automations, all of those things are, we're really at the beginning of those stages and, seeing what machine learning can do and the communication between machines, I think that's really, we're on the horizon of a lot of those things as well.
We talk about Moore's Law and how quickly technology evolves. And I've heard people saying it just can't keep up. And now we've seen that we've cracked that barrier in some ways of AI that is available to people like us, not to people in big research labs. And it does seem like we're now going to hit another kind of sprint, maybe not sprint, maybe it's a marathon of these technologies being inserted into our daily lives beyond my thermostat that knows when I'm home and when I'm not, or my doorbell that sends me a text if something happens in the neighborhood. Now it's going to be every device, it seems like, in my life could be smarter than I am.
Yeah. And think about it. The first digital photo was taken 27 years ago, I think, 1996, if I remember right. Think about that. They say that more pictures are taken every day than in like the first 100 years of photography. The iPhone is what, maybe 15 years old? iPads, some of the technologies that we have now, smartwatches, none of this stuff is all that old. Where we're going, there are much smarter people that know what the path is or have identified what the paths are. But, I think that the sky's the limit. I mean, if you look at, and we tend to go through technologies like that. Look at air flight, early 1900s or late 1800s, early 1900s, first flight. But we were using planes for intercontinental travel and war by World War I. We were on the moon within 50 or 60 years of the first flight. So, I think that technologies these days, we're in the same way. Some of the reports that I read talking about artificial intelligence and how to work on things like regenerating bodies or how to repair themselves. It's just scary what the opportunities and possibilities are.
Yeah, you and I may never age beyond something a few years from now.
I was going to say, careful, don't share anything beyond that.
Yeah, I wasn't sharing mine either, although people probably know by now. So how does innovation come into play in modern supply chain?
Yeah, I think in a number of ways. Again, I mentioned big data. We're able to analyze things in a much different way. I can look at consumer activity and consumer behaviors in a much different way than I used to. Used to be able to see just by running large datas and having the people that can analyze these things. One thing that we have these days that we never used to have is analysts buried within the leadership of each building. People that can look at data and make decisions on it, whether it's where to put the inventory in an active location or in reserves, where to put the right amount of inventory to make sure that we're able to get it out to the customer the quickest. The space that we're working in with innovation that helps productivity, we're able to be more productive. We're able to better understand our people and engage with them in a different way. If you look at paperless, that may seem like a very simple thing, but the fact that I can now take a tablet, whereas I used to have a frontline leader, you used to have to go to a computer and do a report or write a review or deal with an attendance issue. Now I can actually have that leader take a tablet and they have very comprehensive reports that they can get into and work side by side with people instead of getting isolated into an office to deal with things. That is a significant change in the way that we used to do business. Getting closer to the associate. It's just as important as getting close to the customer outside the building. There are things that technology has driven. I mean, even here, we're face-to-face on a video conference. That's something that was driven by COVID that helped get us closer together just from an overall perspective of the world is smaller now. So there's lots of innovations that I think are helping out in ways in that way.
On the theme of innovation, then, how can supply chains protect themselves from future disruption?
Yeah, we'll never be able to protect ourselves from disruptions. There's going to be disruptions. That's a fact. I think the biggest thing that supply chains need to look at is resilience. How do we react to the disruption that's facing us? COVID was, as far as I remember, it was the biggest disruption that I've ever been a part of. And, it was global and it impacted everything. Immediately, most of my buildings are e-com buildings. And so we went from a lot of the retail sector shut down, physical stores shut down for a period. We were considered a critical source because supply chains had to keep running. Even though you may not have had a product that was considered critical, you might have 100 containers at the port that were blocking other products that could be coming in. So supply chains had to keep running. We also our economies had to keep running. So e-com was the way to go in a lot of ways. We had to keep facilities running. So what we saw at the time, the disruptions were extreme. I had to do social distancing within a building. I couldn't have people working within 6 feet of each other. And in a normal operation, I would have people that could be 2 or 3 feet away from each other. So now I had to put up plexiglass partitions in the break rooms. I could only have so many people in a break room at a time. I had to do deep cleaning in areas where there might be an infection or, any kind of contact tracing. There were issues with getting people in the building. There was issues with getting staffing. we had to react pretty immediately. Resilience is the name of the game. The question is, what are we doing now to make sure that we're mitigating in advance of those things happening? I see a lot of companies that are working towards multi-sourcing. I see a lot of movements towards the coast or getting out of a single stream where if let's say you had all of your operations in Columbus, Ohio, it's where our headquarters is, so I'll mention that one. But let's say you had all your operations in Columbus and a large tornado hit Columbus, it wiped out your ability to distribute your product. There needs to be some redundancy in other areas of the country. We're starting to see moves towards that. Cybersecurity is a big disruptor that could potentially impact a lot of companies. We see that all the time where there's somebody that gets hit with a cyber attack and it can shut down their operations. It can impact them to the point where it could put them out of business. A number of potential issues with small businesses going into bankruptcy or going out of business. So single sourcing into suppliers is a big issue. Not only do you have to look at your tier 1 suppliers, but you've got to look at tier 2 and tier 3 to see how they're set up and to make sure that they've got, not just your initial ones. Governance, ESG issues are a big opportunity. There's a lot of things that happen out in the world with social issues. Those can impact your company. You've got to make sure that you're partnered the right way, that your suppliers are educated and that you know what they're doing when it comes to environmental, social governance issues. There's no excuse if you're partnered with someone who has an issue with any of those things in ESG, you're going to be held accountable for it. So making sure that you understand what they're chasing after and making sure that they're solid in their own ESG. Cost is going to increase as you drive resiliency programs. That's a fact, but making sure that you're setting up now instead of waiting for it to happen. I think there's a lot of cost increase that if people had been more resilient and had set up reactions to disruptions in advance, they would not have seen as high of cost as it came down. But really, diversification, making sure that you're set up now for the future. People aren't working on the next disruption now, they're going to be behind. And so, we have the opportunity, DHL does, we're just so broad across the world. There's a lot of things that we've done and are doing to make sure that we're set up for the next disruption as well. I believe we're a very resilient company and we are taking a look with our partners at how to mitigate the next disruptions. It's coming. We just don't know where yet.
So, Mike, you were talking about supply chain resiliency and what companies can do to anticipate the next. And we also recognize that we didn't anticipate COVID. A lot of people did not anticipate Russia invading the Ukraine. Both of those had significant supply chain impacts. We now know what's happening with cybersecurity and AI. How do you prepare for something that you don't know about?
I think asking the question about what could be next, we are aware of most of what could be a disruption. So I'll give you an example. We know that there's unrest in China, especially when it comes to Taiwan. I'm not a manufacturer. I'm not personally in the semiconductor business. We do have partners where we deal with semiconductors and other sectors in DHL. But I would expect that people are looking to source out semiconductors to a different area of the world. If they're not, they should be. That's the expectation that I would have for my company. DHL asks itself the same questions. We're very advanced when it comes to cybersecurity. There's an expectation from all of us that we're aware of the potential risks that we can bring into our own company. I will tell you, I think it's and I'm sure other companies use the same method, but I get a number of emails a year that come to my email box at DHL, and it's a ploy to see if I will click on the wrong thing and to really introduce risk by someone that's phishing. I will tell you, I generally pass. I think I failed once in the last 3 years, but it's a way for us to say, hey, are you creating risk or are you not? We're at the forefront of, I believe our IT departments are just unbelievable when it comes to setting up the right cyber security methods and making sure that we're tight in everything that we do. The same thing with overall risks. I think we've got a a broad knowledge base at DHL. We've got 570,000 employees. We've got just so many people across the globe that work on mitigation issues. We collaborate with our partners to make sure that they're looking at things the right way. I think we take a look at the potential risks and we build mitigators in place far ahead of when we need them.
So the combination of all of the things you've talked about early on, from robots, all of the kinds of bots, human assistants, where you've got exoskeletons and machines to load and unload and help people navigate climate, and things like lifting heavy boxes that you probably can't do for a 30 or 40-year career, really help. Then adding predictive analytics, partnering with other technology firms, looking at AI, and then looking at trends. It seems like you are doing everything companies can do to become more resilient, or anything companies can reasonably do to become more resilient. I want to pick up now on what DHL does for its employees. I know you're a top place to work, and I'm occasionally cynical about companies who win awards, because I recognize that there is a market to purchase awards. And yet, having worked with DHL, you really are a company that is exceptional in how employees are treated. So, can you talk about why you've stayed and what you like about DHL?
Yeah, I will share a story that happened to me recently, and I have heard that this is not a rare story. It's happened in many other circumstances. But I was recently at our annual conference that we had in Cancun. We have an annual operations conference. I fell sick on the way down there, and I was great being in Cancun. It's not so great being in your hotel room. Very sick. But I actually ended up getting so sick that a couple days into the trip down there, I had to be taken by ambulance to the ICU. I spent 3 days in the hospital down there. I was on a couple of phone calls with our global head of security and our COO for North America, working on ways to make sure that I was taken care of, financially. They require payment up front in Mexico. They don't honor your insurance. We had some global insurance, but they were, had to work through some paperwork and things like that. These folks took the reins. They were ready to fly my wife down on the next available flight. They were ready to get me out of the country on a non-commercial flight if needed. I had someone who stayed with me at the hospital at all times. There were people checking up. I've got so many texts that I couldn't answer them all. And, I had people following up with me. Well, actually, even now, when I pop on a call with one of my peers or one of my partners, they want to know how I was and what happened then. And I think it's times like that. And I've heard many instances of people that went through this type of a thing. But it's times like that it makes it a great place to work. It's not just, well, we say that we're a great place to work, but now we're going to follow up on it. And it's not just that, but it's the dignity that I'm treated with every day. I will tell you, DHL is one of the least political organizations that I've ever worked for. We're all about execution, driving the basics, making sure that our customers are satisfied. And our customers are two-tiered. It's really the partners that we work with. We have 500 operations in the United States alone and 40,000 associates. And it's not just those companies that we work with, but it's really their customer. The activities that I see at DHL, everyone rowing in the same direction and making sure that we're all achieving the same goals. There is a common goal, and we're very in tune with what those needs are. Yet we treat people with dignity. We're very big on equity and inclusion. Those are big words these days that everyone is after, but we see it. We see it all the time, the way that we treat people and the programs that we go through together.
As part of that, ESG is a popular term right now, with some people popular in that it's required to be an effective corporate citizen. For others, it's a lightning rod for the woke world is trying to abduct us. So, acknowledging that there's a range of point of views, it seems like DHL is attentive to environmental, social, and governance as a company? Being a global enterprise, as you said, you need to. But can you say a little bit more about each of those components? Because that seems to be one of the things that makes it a good company to work for. As an employee, you have a great experience and it's a place you're proud to work for.
We'll start out with diversity and inclusion. DHL embraces that. We take classes on it. We're expected to honor that. If there are deviations where you're not being inclusive, it's addressed. Diversity is celebrated. We have a culture calendar. We have celebrations that we honor, whether it's certain days that we celebrate. Black History Month is a month-long celebration that we embrace. I have some sessions with customers where we'll have a quarterly business review, but part of our business review is some sort of community affairs thing that we do. We have a volunteer day coming up where everyone is encouraged to volunteer for that day. You're encouraged to do voluntary things throughout the year. There is an embracing on, whether that there be looking at female leaders and female opportunities or any kind of other cultural opportunities. DHL embraces it very heavily. I see it happen every day. When it comes to sustainability, we've made commitments to sustainability where our goal by 2050 is to be net zero on emissions. We have targets that are set out for 2030 where we're going to bring our tonnage on greenhouse gases down from 39 million metric tons down to 29 million. We will have spent 7 billion euros on green technologies by 2030. We expect by 2030 to have 60% of our last mile deliveries done by electric vehicles. We have a Go Green initiative that over 70,000 of our 570,000 logistics professionals are already trained in, and we continue that training. As far as sustainable aviation goes, aviation fuel blend to over 30% by 2030. Carbon neutral buildings are important to us. Design 100% of our new buildings to be carbon neutral. And then we offer green alternatives for 100% of our core products and solutions. That's our goal. So, when we talk about a great place to work, we actually do drive safety first. The safety numbers in our DHL buildings are some of the best I've seen in the industry. Attracting and retaining the best talent. We do an employee engagement survey every year, or I should say an employee opinion survey. Our goal is to create and maintain a consistent 80 plus score on employee engagement. We've hit those numbers. We're planning on increasing our share of women in upper and middle management to 30% by 2025. And then governance, we're a publicly traded company and we have, commitment not just to our customers, but our shareholders. We're a very compliant company. We have codes of conduct that we follow. I go through a code of conduct training every year. Every manager, every senior manager in DHL goes through this code of conduct training. Policies and guidelines are reviewed regularly and changed to meet the evolvement of governance. We have a number of audits that we go through to make sure that we're following what we say that we're going to follow. We have expectations that our suppliers are doing the same things. We have risk indicators that tell us if there are suppliers that are high risk. And, we'll do due diligence on that as well. So I think there's a number of things that not only are we committing to doing these things, but we're following up on the commitment and making sure that we're governing the right way.
And each of those seems to go hand in hand with building a more resilient organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're all doing the right thing, and it makes it easy when there is an issue within DHL to grab a group of people that are all, again, rowing in the same direction and make sure that we collaborate together to, when there are issues. When COVID hit and we had to figure out how to run buildings, we put policies in place so quickly. We went out and we got protective gear, the PPE that we needed to wear, masks, and we ran out of hand sanitizer. We found ways to make our own. We had safety managers that literally were taking towels and making solutions to put in there so that we could use those towels to clean or to wipe hands or whatever. So we had incessant calls about how to best keep social distancing. Or when COVID hit, we allowed people to take a COVID leave. You didn't feel comfortable working. You could stay home and take care of your family and yourself, and you weren't at risk of losing your job. I think that's a respect and a dignity that I didn't hear that all the time from every company. I'm sure there were some protectors from the government that happened, but we did it naturally. And, that's the kind of company that we are.
When I first started working with DHL, this was a number of years ago, well before COVID. And this speaks to my cynicism that, people talked about what a great place to work it is. But most companies, when you talk to their executives or their HR people, they say that. And I saw what you're pointing to, that in every interaction, people were positive, they were constructive, they were respectful. I haven't worked with many organizations that had that level of consistency across a global footprint. It's not just a good office in Columbus, and we don't let other people see these, the misfits off in the corner. It really seems consistent that if people are a poor fit for the culture, they don't remain very long. So, as we come to wrapping up, what are you most excited about going forward in the next year?
There is a tremendous amount of opportunity in supply chain. We talked a lot about DHL, and I'll do my sales pitch. Partner with us. We are the best at what we do. We're known as an industry leader in supply chain. We know our business. We have experts across the board. When you partner with DHL, you don't necessarily just build an operation for your company, but you get everything that DHL comes with. You get an engineering team, you get an HR team, you get a finance team, you get a business development team, you get an innovation team. We're out there running 60 plus different types of innovations in our buildings, and we're testing that out. We're putting the capital into that to make proof cases to see if it would work in your operations. Leverage that. Get a hold of us and partner with us if you have supply chain issues, or if you don't have supply chain issues yet, think about some of the disruptions that you could face in the future. Help us to mitigate that. What excites me the most is that those opportunities that are out there, our growth pattern is just unbelievable. There are lots of people that are partnering with us now. If you were to look at the names of the different companies that we partner with, it's almost any large company in the US. Either we have partnered with them or we're partnering with them now. To me, that's what's exciting. I think that supply chain overall, it's exciting to see that it's morphing and maturing into something that's just such a viable opportunity. I think a lot of people, if you've been in the career as long as I have, 25, 30 years, we probably fell into supply chain. I actually got into supply chain. Always thought I was going to be in construction. I loved building things, and I have zero talent for building things, so I sucked at it. So I ended up one day quitting a construction job and getting a job as a temp forklift driver. And I have built a career in progressive positions and getting into leadership and learning how to be a leader with some really good large companies. And I would say that the maturation process that's gone into my leadership in the last 8 years with DHL has just escalated exponentially. Some of the things that I'm involved in, it's exciting to hear some of the things I'm able to do. The different departments that I work in, whether it's IT, I sponsor a WM group. I work in inventory control on any given day. I deal a lot with innovation. I work in the business development field. I work in operations, I work in HR. There's no day that's the same. And, I deal a lot. We have a very robust intern program at DHL. We sponsor roughly 250 interns per year. And we have a very solid program in the summertime where we run a number of projects. All of our interns are involved in a project, and then we do a capstone event where a bunch of leaders come in and interface with these interns, and we offer them jobs. It allows me a chance to really show them my passion around supply chain. I see a lot more programs in colleges where it's a logistics professional program, and I think that there's more that will be developed in the near future. We're starting to mature in logistics. We need that talent. We're so desperate for talent over the next few years. We need people that are coming out of school with some of the skills that we're talking about, innovation, the ability to analyze data. These young professionals coming out of school, it's unbelievable the playground that they get if they come to a company like DHL or really any supply chain. I'm partial to DHL just because of the broad range of experiences that I get to get involved in. you can have a bright career in a place like DHL. I know I get very preachy about it, but supply chain overall is it's just phenomenal. And that's what excites me the most is being involved in a company like this.
Mike, thank you for sharing your wisdom and experiences about what's happened in the rearview mirror with COVID and as we look forward to how DHL is becoming a more resilient company and how that will continue over time, as well as how DHL is a responsible corporate citizen serving its people, its customers, its end users, and its planet. You really do model that idea that being a corporate citizen is a part of your fabric, not just something that the PR department talks about. So we appreciate you being a guest on the show, sharing your wisdom. And to our listeners, thank you for joining the show. I trust that you've heard something about supply chain that will inform your business decisions as well.
It's been a pleasure, Maureen. Thanks for having me.
So, Mike, one last question. Where would people find out about you or DHL?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Mike McLellan. And I would direct you, if you do a search on DHL delivered, there is a lot of the information that I talked about is right there. They have sections on globalization, digitalization, sustainability, e-commerce with some very in-depth articles and data and information. DHL.com and search on delivered.
So to our listeners, please like us, share us, and follow us on LinkedIn, or you can follow me as well, Maureen Metcalf on LinkedIn. And we post daily to share leadership insights to help you elevate yourself as a leader and run a more effective organization.